Hi, welcome to BBB. Today we're going to take a quick look at compression. Again, it's an enormous subject, like many things in this book, and something that I'm not going to attempt to cover in massive detail. However, I'm sure I can give you a good insight if we look at a few common examples. So let's have a look at the computer now. So I've loaded up a drum loop into Logic 9 here, and I'm going to show you the basic Logic compressor and what it can do. So let's bring it up in its default state. Now I'm going to select a moderate ratio. We're not going to worry too much about the ratio at the moment. Now the first thing we're going to try and achieve is an increased attack on the sound of the drums. So let's have a quick listen to the drums as they stand before any compression. Okay, so they're quite smooth. So what we're going to do is try to increase their impact. So the first thing we need to do is to get this threshold set so the compressor is actually reacting to the drum hits. Okay, now we are overdoing it to illustrate a point here. And you could see there it was reducing the volume of the drum hits by about 8 to 10 dB, which is a lot of compression. So we don't want the compressor to stamp down too soon. We want it to allow the hit of the snare to come through before doing anything. So we're going to slow the attack. This is the time in which it takes for the compressor to react once we've triggered its threshold. So let's slow that right up and let's have another little play. You can already hear the transient starting to stick out. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to set the release. This is the time it takes the compressor to stop working. And we're going to time it so it's released in time for the next hit. Now next, as we're getting about 6 to 8 dB of gain reduction, we're going to use the makeup gain here to compensate. Now if we have a listen, we should have the same drum loop, but much more smack. Let's try pushing it even further. So you can go as crazy as you like. Okay, let's reset this compressor and let's try doing the opposite. Let's try reducing the hit of that drum beat. So again, we're going to adjust our compressor to a moderate ratio and we're going to use our threshold to get some action going. Now this time we want the compressor to stamp down on the drum hit immediately to catch that spike. So we're going to use a fast attack time so it reacts quickly. And because we only want to stamp on the hit, we don't want to touch the sustain, we're going to make it release fast as well. It's going to stamp down and release quickly. And because we've lost about 8 dB of volume, we're going to compensate here. Now, as well as the snare not having quite such a crack on the front of it, you'll also notice the added bonus that the details in between hits appears to come up in volume. And that's because the compressor isn't compressing between hits, yet it's still got 8 dB of gain. Now let's try and get the drums pumping, which is something you might have heard spoken about in mixing circles, which is when the compressor appears to kind of breathe and heave with the speed of the drums. And we're going to do this by leaving a similarly fast attack time, but we're going to play with the release. Now you can hear the compressor recovering in between hits, and it kind of gives you a lurch forward in momentum, and it can really add a bit of energy to a drum beat that maybe is played a bit sloppily. Now, whilst we might be getting a little bit advanced here, parallel compression is a great way to use these things. So on Logic's compressor, we have a very convenient mix fader. Now, on 0%, the signal is passing straight through the compressor untouched. At 100%, you're only hearing the compressed signal. So our compressed signal right now is pretty heavy duty and might not be suitable for the song. However, if I let the natural signal through and just feed in a little bit of our super compressed signal, you can get a great happy medium. So if you want to get less attack or more attack, if you want to increase the sustain of the drums or reduce the sustain, you can use these principles. And if you're lucky enough to have a mix fader on your compressor, you can get into parallel compression very, very easily. If you don't have a mix fader in your compressor, things get a little bit more complicated. But it's not too difficult to work out how you could kind of root one out in your DAW software. So let's apply those principles to a vocal. This is Ronnie Jones and a little snippet of Why Don't You Stay. And this time, we're not trying to increase or decrease the attack of what he's singing. We're actually trying to level up the individual words within a phrase, but we can apply the same principles. So let's fire up our compressor in its default state. And what we're going to try and do is compress the loudest parts of his vocal and leave the quietest parts untouched. So let's get this ratio up to a moderate level. And let's play with the threshold.
Well, I know a lot of guys have been in love with you, girl, but you didn't let that many into your secret world.
Now there, we just hit a sweet spot, and you saw quite a lot of compression on the loud notes and none at all on the quiet ones. Now let's see how much compression we're actually getting.
Well, I know a lot of guys have been in love with you, girl, but you didn't let that many into your...
So we're getting about 4 or 5, so let's compensate for that with our gain.
Well, I know a lot of guys have been in love with you, girl, but you didn't let that many into your secret world.
Now, the attack and the release are not quite as crucial here as they are with the drums. However, if you wanted to let through a bit more t and p, you could slow the attack right down. Now here I want to do the opposite. I want to stamp down on the harsh elements of the vocal, and I want to keep the compressor working quite slowly. So I'm going to have a slow release. Let's just keep adjusting things until we think we're getting a lot of compression but a nice result.
Well, I know a lot of guys have been in love with you, girl, but you didn't let that many into your secret world. Well, I know a lot of guys have been in love with you, girl.
Okay, that sounds pretty good to me. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to duplicate that same compressor. I've now got 2 identical compressors working not in parallel but in line. The second compressor is obviously going to need to be tweaked a little bit, but let's try and really smash this vocal.
Well, I know a lot of guys have been in love with you, girl, but you didn't let that many into your secret world. Well, I know a lot of guys have been in love with you, girl, but you didn't let that many into your secret world. Well, I know...
Now, with the two compressors in parallel, you can really start to hear that the quiet bits of the vocal have come up. We know this for sure because we can really hear the breaths. Let's have a quick listen.
Well, I know a lot of guys have been in love with you, girl, but you didn't let that many into your secret world.
Now, you could go crazy and even add a third or a fourth compressor. You could use different kinds of compressors. You might have some interesting ones that you can throw into the mix. Each will do something different, and I find you can get a lot more by doing several stages of compression rather than getting one compressor to do all the work. So I hope this has given you a bit of an insight as to how compression works. The important thing is you need to recognise what you're hearing and you need to identify what you're trying to achieve. So if you can think, I need to reduce the attack of that snare drum, and then listen carefully that the compressor is actually doing that, you're on the right path. If you're just applying compression for no other reason than you think you need to, don't bother. I'll see you in the next video.